Gaming Classic. We are over here at the Marco, Stern, and Kingpin Games booth on the Marco TV stage. My name is Matt Benzik. I am your moderator for this homebrew panel. The Midwest Gaming Classic is probably one of the most homebrew-friendly shows we have. I think as far as the big shows go, MGC's always had a big homebrew presence. I know Ed's been here a while, and we'll introduce everybody. I'm getting ahead of myself. But we have a lot of homebrews out here today right by the Marco booth. We have 4 fantastic designers on stage, but that is just a cross-section of the talent we have out here. A couple of us couldn't make it up on stage today. Several of us didn't bring out games. We have some fantastic homebrewers that became industry designers in the crowd today. And yeah, it's going to be a good talk. We're going to spotlight each one of the 4 of these guys, talk about their process, talk about their games, and Emoto's going to be running around in the homebrew area to spotlight your game. So if there's something that you guys want to talk about specifically about your game, she'll be able to identify it. So like I said, my name's Matt Benzik. I am a pinballer, homebrew designer, but I haven't worked on my game in like 2 years because that's like a rite of passage in the homebrew world, I believe. It will be here later. To my right, I've got Ed Owens, designer of Ghost in the Shell. So Ed, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell me about your game?
All right, thank you, Matt. Ghost in the Shell, Ed Owens. I've been a Wisconsin resident, been coming to Midwest Gaming Classic since 2008. And I just agree with what you're saying. I mean, it's been a very homebrew show for me. It's where I first was introduced into homebrew games and got to play them for the first time. And it's where my game actually was here in 2017 as an Aerosmith cabinet that had warranty issues, and I bought it off a guy. And in 2018, the first year we were in this building, I brought Ghost in the Shell here, and it's been coming every year since. But as you say, we all have a cool down period in our game, so it's been kind of stalled the last 2 years. But I did powder coat my armor, so that's something. It looks prettier. Still plays about the same, and yeah, the game has just been all home built, and it's been a team of me and anybody else who's been willing to help a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's something that. Like when we talk about so you brought your game out here. Now, before I get too ahead of myself, Ghost in the Shell is your first fully custom game, correct?
Correct.
And before you got into like full-on custom homebrew, you also did some retheming as well, right?
I did a retheme of Big Game. I bought the game with no legs, no circuit boards, no back glass. And at the time I bought it, I think it was late 2000s, and none of that stuff was available, at least back glass art and stuff. And I'm like, I work with the Greyhound Rescue, so we decided to retheme it. Me, my wife, and some friends I had, to Greyhounds to Race Home for GPA Wisconsin. And we've taken it to different shows, had it to different tournaments, used it to raise money for the Greyhound Pets of America.
Very cool, very cool. So, what with Ghost in the Shell, what inspired you to create that pinball machine? That homebrew. Was there, when you watched that content, was there something that stood out that was like, I need this to be pinball, or like kind of like a marquee shot or marquee mech that you had in your mind?
I'm never a huge fan into anything except for maybe pinball and cars. I don't want to be a huge fan service to anything and know everything about everything, but I do love certain things. And in the anime world, I've always loved Cowboy Bebop and Ghost in the Shell. And I actually have sketches from a Cowboy Bebop game with 3 ramps and some underplay color modes. I had it all figured out, and then I also was working on Ghost in the Shell. And I'm like, okay, well, at the time I was getting started, there was a gentleman making a Batman 66 homebrew. And then Stern came out with a Batman 66, and that crushed him. And he's just like, we're done, I'm done, I'm just gonna not even do this anymore. And I thought, let's do a theme that has a fan service, but I don't think will get made. And I know Cowboy Bebop, I think that could very well be successful. Whereas Ghost in the Shell, there's a lot of content to draw from. And I love the fast-paced action, which translates to pinball, but I also love the deep thinking, which translates to enjoying the show. So I focus on the fast-paced action side of things on the pinball, and kind of took away from the Laughing Man series of standalone complex.
Okay, cool. And you talk about your iterative process. So, again, going back on things, you brought your game here out in 2018, the first year you brought it here. Full disclosure, that was the first homebrew I had ever played. I remember it was, whichever hall you had it on an end cap, and I saw this cab that had like plywood in the plywood play field, and it just looked different. And I played it, and it was a very different experience as far as how Ed designed something versus what a lot of the designers that we've known to grow and we've grown up with as far as the major manufacturers. And so can you talk about the iterative process of that first play field that was there, kind of finding the parts and inspiration, and then bringing it back to the game that it is now with on the far left side, you've got that the LCD screen that's playing content and stuff like that.
So I distinctly remember that show, and there's this guy who kept coming up to me and saying, I want to know more. I want to know more. And we took the glass off and we dig in, and I kept showing him more. And, I was that guy a few shows prior, and somebody showed me more, and look where we are now. So that's a pretty cool thing to be able to pass that on. And now we're helping each other out. As far as my design process, I don't do digital with any of that. I started all physical because I can cut and weld scrap sheet metal in my garage and make a ramp, make a wireform pretty quickly, quicker than I can draw it. And I made my first ramp on the left side all out of sheet metal off my fridge. About a few years prior, I had built a new home, so I had a new front metal for my fridge. That's where all my ramps and all my guides came from. And as far as the wood, was actually leftover 7/16 sheeting that was, this piece is straight enough and doesn't have that many knots. Cut it down and rock and roll. And actually, some of that scrap from that piece is in other people's homebrew games. But it was just, I started physically by having the flippers work, and then I ended up taking a dowel and I would roll it on the play field and be like, okay, this is the flipper, and this is the angle I want. What does the shot look like up here? And then start talking to people. Every single game I owned had no glass on it at that time. So I'm measuring, Taxi, the shots are easy. They're all 2.5 inches. Oh, this shot's kind of hard on this other game. That's 1.5 inches. That's 1.25 inches. And like the ramps, once they come up, they get narrow. They all go down to 1.25 inches. So just different things like that. I started looking at and talking to people and physically building it. And I've had 3 or 4 renditions of everything in that game on that white wood. That game went to the original construction board went to like 3 shows, like 1,000 plus plays. Pretty beat up, but it worked.
Yeah, that playfield was a workhorse. There was definitely some that kind of looks like an ill-placed knot, but it played well and it was fun, and I think it inspired a lot of guys to get into homebrew, and you being as approachable and community centric. And to go off topic of not talking about Ed, I think that's one thing that anyone that's watching on stream that's ever thought about designing a pinball machine, come out to shows and go to the homebrew sections, come out to the Marco booth and say, hey, I'm thinking about homebrew, and they're going to connect you with someone like us to talk about it, because the homebrew community is very much a community.
Talk to us. Say, hey, well, how do you do this? Let's take the glass off. Let's take the playfield up. Let's talk about the construction techniques, the wood used, the how to make the playfield. Who knows who to make plastic and vinyl?
Yep.
Talk to us. That's what we want to grow. It's not a competition here. It's competition just to have fun.
And so yeah, very much community. I'm bad at transitions, but it's awesome what you've helped out, and seeing the iterative process on your game, and I'm very excited to see the next iterations. I think the next person I'm going to call on is the person that did his homebrew in absolute hard mode. So in the homebrew world, there's you have to control your machine. There's a couple different ways you can control your machine. There's a couple different manufacturers of board sets, software, firmwares, frameworks. Guys like Ed and I, we use the P3 multimorphic system. Guys like Tanner use the fast hardware with MPF. And then there's guys like Kelly that designed his own board set, designed his own framework. And the first time I saw it at MGC, I thought it was just an unproduced game that was a prototype from like Williams or something. That the level of fit and finish of that game, Undertale, was absolutely fantastic. So Kelly, why don't you introduce yourself to the stream and the wonderful audience we have, and tell us a little bit about Undertale and your second project, Volcano Blast.
Hi, so I'm Kelly. So so the concept behind the Undertale machine actually came about in, I want to say 2017. We went to this very show. It was at the Brookfield rather than here, but there were a number of custom-built games there. And myself and Maddie down there, who is also my artist, we were kind of looking at them and thinking, wouldn't it be cool to build a game? And what kind of game could we build? Well, our friends all loved Undertale, and that just seemed like the perfect choice. And so for that one, I used an old version of Visual Pinball to do the design work, and then I looked into what options there were for control systems and all that kind of thing. And I remember looking at, what it cost to acquire those. It was something like $700 or $800 for a board set. And I was thinking, well, I could do that, or I could be insane and unhinged and create my own system. And I think you know what I did.
Yep.
And so I ended up creating, it certainly wasn't perfect, but I created something vaguely System 11-ish to control that game. And it wasn't without its issues, but it seemed like it worked pretty darn well. And since then, I learned a whole bunch of different things about, electronics and circuit board design and stuff like that. And so now moving into the project that I got now, Volcano Blast, I would say it's even more of a custom board set, because I had custom PCBs printed and all kinds of stuff. So
very cool. So with my connection to Ed, I've gotten to see his game kind of transition through the years, and working with him on that. Undertale, I only saw it that year, and it felt like a complete done game. Like, what was your build out process like? You said use VPX. Like, once you got it into hardware, and those that don't know, VPX is a pinball modeling software. It's a game you can build your own pinball machines. Some guys that now work at some heavy hitter pinball manufacturers designed a game using that, and got himself a job through that. But how much did you have to change from going from VPX to the real life, and what was that process kind of like?
So it actually, if we're talking about Undertale, it went through quite a few different design changes, and to be perfectly honest, it could have gone through one more, because for that particular game, I went pretty much straight to a printed playfield. I basically skipped the whitewood stage which admittedly made me miss a few things that I ended up having to make some significant changes involving a pair of aviation snips in order to fix. But yeah, it pretty much went from Visual Pinball 9 actually straight to the printed
straight to the
playfield.
print.
Yep,
That's awesome. And so Volcano Blast, was that built the same way? Started in VPX, and what whitewood are you at now? That because you learned on Undertale not to skip that whitewood phase.
Yep.
You know, the real world and the digital world may differ a little bit. You know, what version of the whitewood are you on now?
Yeah, for sure I learned a few things from that. I would say it's technically the second whitewood at this point. The first one was really not much. It was a pair of flippers that were plugged into a power supply with high voltage switches. There wasn't really a lot going on there, but I had some cardboard walls and stuff. I just wanted to make sure that the shots worked approximately the way I wanted and stuff like that. And then we moved on to what I got now, which is perhaps more of a green wood than a white wood. But at this point, we're at a prototype stage where I'm just seeing what works and what doesn't. For the most part, it works. There's a couple of minor things that I'm going to want to improve, a couple of ball traps that I've discovered at this show, and some other stuff. But for the most part, I've definitely learned some lessons from Undertale, how to do things right.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, ball traps, those aren't too bad. I remember one year, Elwin brought Archer out to Expo, and he had to go do something, and he literally left a bag of balls in the coin door because there was a hole in the back of the playfield. He's like, every once in a while a ball's gonna launch back there, just put another one in, like we'll figure it out later. And it's just like, you know, that stuff happens. You find that out in the prototyping phase, and you know, we all do it. So so you're at Greenwood. When do you think, when is the project going to be done? You know, when do you think you're going to have artwork? Like, you know, what's your goals there?
I am fairly confident it'll be looking more finished next year.
Awesome.
Honestly, this year is not very much different from how it looked last year, other than it has a little bit more gameplay. The biggest reason for the delay is that I literally spent the last year creating the sound system for this game.
Awesome.
Because not only did I make a custom board set, I created a custom audio synthesis engine specifically inspired by System 11. So
you you're software emulating the System 11 soundboard. Wow. Dude, like there's libraries for this. Like, you know,
I was going to say, they do have these things now called MP3s.
Yeah.
I realize that.
You know,
So when you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, do you start by baking the bread, or do you
No. What he starts by doing is he starts by growing the nut.
Exactly.
And it's a very detailed process, especially in Upper Peninsula.
Yeah, the Upper Peninsula. You have 3 months of sun.
3 months of sun, so they take a very long time to grow. Then, after they've matured, he takes them and grinds them down into a nice paste.
But yeah, so and again, part of why, you know, we've collected these guys up here is each of us have had such a different way of approaching homebrew. You know, Ed going very much hands-on with hardware. My personal homebrew was very much CAD, you know, started in CAD and, you know, 3D modeling software. You know, Kelly doing, you know, VPX or, you know, Visual Pinball. And then there's Tanner. Tanner is a fantastic guy from Battle Creek, Michigan, who I was actually his robotics team coach in high school. We lost contact through college and then met at Expo when he had all of his I call them art house pinball machines, but I don't know if that's the correct description. So Tanner, why don't you you know, give the audience your entry point into pinball with your, you know, your collegiate, you know, your time at U of M, and then now what you're doing with your designs.
Yeah, sure. So like Matt said, my name's Tanner. And to give the abbreviated version of how I got into pinball and making my own games was when I was an undergrad, like 10 years ago now, which is one of those sentences you say out loud and get the ick.
Yeah.
But anyway, a long time ago when I was a sophomore, I was in art school. I come from an art background. And I decided for my sophomore project I was going to build a pinball machine because, you know, I had all the skills to do so, obviously. And spoiler alert, I did not have all the skills to be able to build a machine then. But it kind of planted the idea in my brain for later on where, like 5 years ago now, I went to a graduate program for art. And going into that program, I wanted to have kind of a larger project rather than just say, you know, making a bunch of paintings and having a show, which is a very valid way of doing grad school. But I was like, hey, I'm going to build an entire arcade because, you know, that's also sensible. And so throughout that project, I was in a weird kind of state of isolation from the rest of the pinball world, just because beforehand, I wasn't a pinball guy. I kind of got into pinball through making machines rather than making a machine through being into pinball. But at some point in that process, I bought a Fast Starter bundle, and Aaron invited me to the Fast Slack, and I got into that community, and so on and so forth until we're here now. But to answer your original question, those original games I had there, I would consider more art games than kind of regular pinball. A lot of those were designed in such a way that you could play them like once or twice and get the whole experience. Whereas the games I'm working on now, which are Trashland and House of Flesh and Blood is the current one I'm working on, those are more designed to be like commercial games where they're, you know, very replayable and have fairly deep rule sets to them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you know, anyone that has come to a show and, you know, you see Trashland. Trashland's cab looks about the closest thing that I've seen to like Python's Pinball Circus. You know, it's just a, you know, this thing, you can't miss it. For one, it is bright green and yellow. Everything, it is a multi-layer. If you get a chance to play it, it is a fantastic game. Terrible to move, but fantastic. But I guess, you know, and again, rolling it back to everyone's different experiences, you being not a pinball guy, when you are, you know, thinking about a design, are you thinking about something like, you know, I want this cool shot, or how can I make, or do you do something of like, you know, how can I make the ball do what people aren't expecting the ball to do, or like, what's your kind of design ideas in, you know, like Trashland has a lot of different little things. Are those all things that you just kind of went, I want to do these different things, or did you have a total like 10,000 foot view on that?
Yeah, so I would say like the very core thing I'm interested in making my own games is kind of pushing at the boundaries of what pinball is. I mean, there's a whole lineage of weirdo games that look a little bit different than what you would expect. But ultimately, most games are either, you know, the standard 20 1/4 inches by like 42 inches or whatever, or they're wide bodies. There's not a lot of games that exist outside of that very particular spatial requirements. And for good reasons. There's a lot of logistical reasons that makes sense. But at least for making one-off games for myself, I'm interested in kind of exploring what can be done that hasn't been done before within pinball. So that's both kind of the form factor of the games I make, but then also trying things, like you said, that either I see on like old games that hasn't been done since, or kind of, you know, the weird things that I want to exist in pinball that don't necessarily exist currently. So like the game I brought this time was pretty much kind of fully fleshed out from the start. But with a game like Trashland, that's a game I've redesigned like 5 times at this point. It's been one that kind of, you know, you got the Hegelian dialectical of eventually getting towards it being an actual functioning machine that makes sense. But it's taken a while to get there, so.
Do you count each little mini playfield as a revision, or is like your main playfield at revision 5 and, you know, the vertical playfield at like 3, so really you're at like revision 15 or 30, or do you just not want to count it, really?
Well, I use decimal points. Like, I've done 2 main playfields now and a bunch of little playfields. So it's
Did you add them or multiply them?
Yeah.
And does that count the revisions you do during the show in your hotel room?
Well, you know.
Yeah, like to put this in perspective, Expo last year, I got a photo of you, or no, I think it was MGC last year. He had a 3D printer set up behind his machine because he was like prototyping different like ball guides. Because he wanted to see how fast could he get the ball to roll through something, or could he get it to make it be a little bit more chaotic and less predictable. And and also if something broke, he just started printing it, and like 3 hours later he had the part he needed, and took out the duct taped one and fixed it. So
well, and part of that was I always set really insane goals for myself for shows. So that last year at MGC. I had one version of Trashland for Expo, and then I was like, oh, MGC, I'll do a new playfield, and that'll be fun. And it was less fun, perhaps, than I thought to get it done, but we got there. That was why I brought the printer, was not everything was quite done.
I have similar stories of overambitious goals. The first year I brought out Motor City, the playfield was my process was I designed it in CAD, printed it out on full-size paper, glued it to the playfield, and then so that I had basically assemblies for where everything was. Problem is, paper is rough and it's slow, and so I decided that I needed to make a new playfield 14 days before the show. Now, a smart person would do that once and go, never again. 2 years later, I went, I really need inserts. So I milled a new playfield 18 days before show, had to, epoxy in the inserts, sand it all down, clear coat it, and then completely redo the bottom side of the playfield. All of the wiring was brand new. I think I did 35 hours of streams in like a 4-day period or something. But, that procrastination and like really lofty goals are common in the homebrew community, and that's also why it is so important that we have the community of us makers, people watching us, because it really does motivate us, and when we hit a problem, we're able to support. So if you're interested in homebrew, again, come up to us, talk to us, hit us on streams. The Marco TV people, if you reach out to them, they'll know who to send you to. And, that's again, another awesome community serving an awesome community. I mean, there's guys at the manufacturers that have helped us out when we've been in a bind, and, it's just very cool.
I got a question for Tanner. So, I was talking to you this earlier, and my take on your games is it looks like it walked right out of a Tim Burton film. But we were talking earlier about it, and about the art, and the whole thing is art. But the graphical flat art, and that's all done by you as well.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I come from an art background, and it's always been like drawing's been probably the thing I've always done the most of, but I've always been very into game design and physical computing in different ways. That was kind of how the pinball started. But yeah, so I do all the art for my games as well as actually designing and putting them together.
That's awesome. I mean, I know it makes perfect sense,
yeah,
but sometimes it doesn't click because all the rest of us here are constantly saying, I need help from an artist. I need help. Not like, well, yeah, we're creating art as physical game, but no, yeah, I mean, you're the full package as far as that goes.
Well, and I do think there's an element to anyone who designs and makes pinball machines is at their core kind of a control freak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just doing the art myself allows me to, further have that grip on the thing being the way I want it to be. So
that's awesome.
Sweet. So there's one left at this table. We didn't give him a mic because he's loud enough without it.
Yes,
but,
exactly. I'm someone you ask me the time and I'll tell you how to make a watch.
Yeah.
Jack is looking right now and going, my God, they gave Jobber a microphone. My goodness.
So, Chris, why don't you, again, circling back to everyone's different experiences, Chris, your part in the homebrew scene has been more on homebrewing VPX and
Yes.
arcade.
Well, calling me a
cabinets, correct?
designer is a very liberal interpretation of the word.
I was giving you a lot of credit.
But what I've done with my stuff is, so let me give you my background. My background is more in the traditional video game and television space. So I worked 11 years in Los Angeles. I worked on a bunch of network TV shows, from America's Next Top Model to Deal or No Deal, Hell's Kitchen. And the connection to the video game industry is I worked on G4 TV's X-Play. So I dealt with a lot of individuals that were in this space and seeing games in a very early space. I can tell you stories of how Nintendo, when Super Smash Bros. Melee came out on the Wii, they brought in and I'm not even kidding, they brought a security guard with a Wii in a metal contraption, and it was locked to his arm, and he had to hand the key over to the person and then make sure that we locked it down onto the review station that we were going to be watching, playing the game and then reviewing it from.
Nice.
And
So-
now you can get that on, your favorite pirating site. So fast forward to, I left G4. I was burnt out with television, and I was in graduate school. And I wasn't really, I loved Los Angeles, but I didn't want to stay there. And so I had come back to Minneapolis, and in Minneapolis there is a billiards store called Peter's Billiards. And, well, let me rewind a little bit earlier. So during the time I was at G4, in Glendale, California, where I lived, there was an arcade warehouse called the Vintage Arcade Superstore that I would pass all the time on San Fernando Boulevard. And one day I stopped by and I asked Gene, I said, how much is a Star Trek The Next Generation? Because as a kid, that was my favorite pinball machine. It was at the local record store. I put a lot of time into it. And Gene told me at the time, and this is like 2010 probably, and he goes, it's about $3,000. And being a guy who was living paycheck to paycheck, I was not like, well, goddamn, I got to go to get that game for ourselves. So, long story short, fast forward a couple of years, I'm at this billiards store in Minneapolis called Peter's Billiards, and I see a virtual pinball machine. And I'm flipping through it, and I'm going like, oh, this is pretty damn cool. Like this, it's got Star Trek The Next Generation, and it's got all of these other games I've never heard of, and oh, hey, look, there's Data East Star Wars, and those type of things. So I moved back to Minneapolis. I decide that I'm going to stay there, and I'm like, well, it'd be kind of fun to have an arcade in the house. And so I start researching games and things, and the process to getting these games to being what I now call the dumpster games was just dumb luck, to be totally honest with you. So I decided to build a virtual pin, and I go on Craigslist and I find an HD TV, and I go buy it. And then I was here at the Midwest Gaming Classic, I think 2017, by a coin door. And then they just happened to be building a Portello's restaurant in the town next to mine. And I go there at the end of the process, and they've got a bunch of scaffolding wood, and I go to the foreman and I say, hey, could I have a couple sheets of plywood? Take it home, put it together. For my 40th birthday, I wanted to have friends over to play arcade games, and it was flipping. And I was very happy with it. And then had to make adjustments and all that kind of stuff. So that was version 1.0.
So basically, the idea of your process is how to lower the entry point, and not only
that's one of my main reasons for bringing these things to these shows, because a virtual pinball game is one of the more common homebrew projects. I mean, people do not often, especially in the pinball community, don't understand that Zen Studios is the second largest pinball company in the world as far as revenue, as far as volume. They just released 3 tables this last week. Stern is the juggernaut because they do more in revenue if you take the overall, and this is the MBA in me talking. if you take the revenue, you take the models, you put that into place, they're ahead of Jersey Jack, they're ahead of the other companies. So it's a very common project, and there's a lot of people online, Terry Reed, Way of the Wrench, all those type of, there's several guys, Major Franchi, who will do tutorial videos on how to do that. So back to my thing. So I built the cabinet, MGC 2019 comes up, and I decide, hey, I'm going to bring it and see what people think of it. And I knew it was underpowered when I brought it, and I knew I brought it with a monitor that was not the creme de la creme, but I just wanted to kind of test it out to see what I needed to do. And I brought it here, and I got a lot of feedback, good, bad, indifferent. And one of the feedbacks was, and it was from Eugene Jarvis, actually, this is really laggy, which is a term that I had no idea what the hell that was. So brought it home, decide that I'm going to
beef up the PC.
Nice. Still using recycled. And here's the thing too. When I brought the game to the 2019 Pinball X, or not Pinball Expo.
Oh,
the 2019.
Hello.
Yep, we're good.
Hello.
So basically,
so when I brought it here, it didn't have a name.
Yeah.
So this man right here comes to me and he says, and we just met, and I'd seen his machine the year before. I think I played it. He says to me, hey, Chris, why don't you call it the dumpster dive?
Yeah.
And he tells me the story about all the parts and going more into depth as you did today with all of them. Like, you kind of dumpster dived all the parts, didn't you?
Yeah. And I'm walking around going like, okay, and you know how it is when you get a circle of 6-year-olds together?
Yeah.
And you tell the first six, no, Jack has no experience with that.
We're all
you tell the first 6-year-old that it's Jaws, and then as they get around the crowd, it becomes Purple Monkey Dishwasher.
I thought you went from dumpster dive to dumpster fire because you were afraid it was going to light on fire.
No.
I thought the
so I'm
lights
walking
burned
around.
up on
I'm
it.
walking around the floor, and I come back and I go, "Hey Ed, thanks for that name. I think the dumpster fire is going to work really well."
Yeah.
And so
That's awesome.
he comes to me, and I go, "Okay." So fast forward to now, it is a series of games. I have currently 5 what I call dumpster games with a Z, not an S, that have been made. The other thing I had just kind of whipped together to have an extra game at my birthday party was a really junk Golden Tee Golf.
Yep.
And so I had bought a Golden Tee Golf plug and play that was made by Jack's Pacific. And I got it home and I started playing with it, and I fell in love with it because for a 40 megabyte file, it had a lot of playable Golden Tee on it.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, it'd be fun. Let's get an actual Golden Tee cabinet.
Yep.
So I did that. Then my mother's best friend, my mother is 81 years old. She'd be embarrassed for me saying that. But her best friend one of her best friends was moving into a nursing home. And they had a CRT television in the basement that had a component put. So I did that. Then I got the cabinet.
Nice.
Then I decided to wire a real Golden Tee ball onto this Jack's Pacific plug and play. Started bringing it to shows. It's not here today because the monitor had an issue, which I'll have to fix it. And then just going from there, then the other game was a game called Killer Comet. This was a game that was supposed to be released by Game Plan Inc. in, I believe, 1980, and it never was released. And when I got it, I didn't know what it was. So I took it home and I did some research, and I was like, this is a really obscure game, and it would be fun to restore it. And this is before, I'd gotten that before I got the dumpster fire even started.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, let's bring Killer Comet to show so people can see the work of the people that do that. I mean, I know this for a fact. When you have a situation like with the Batgirl project, okay, for those of you who don't know, Batgirl was supposed to be released on HBO Max this year. It has Michael Keaton in it. And when new ownership came in, they did the unheard of thing, which was they not only decided to not release the movie, they decided to erase that the movie ever existed. And it was 90% done. They also did this.
That's nuts.
So you've got all of these people, and they're doing so much work and so much hard stuff. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to bring Killer Comet to shows. And I even brought, I remember I ran into Roger Stone, and I go, Roger, I've got to ask you about this game, if you know anything about this game. So I walk him over to it, and Roger goes, well, this is video games. You know, I worked in the pinball division. And I said, yeah, well, I would figure that they would talk. And you knew that King of Balloons was coming out, right? Yeah. Well, did you know anything about this game? And he says, I don't know. I think it was probably just sent out to a couple of test locations. And the reason it ended up in Minneapolis was because Minneapolis was a test location where Williams and Bally and whoever would send a lot of games up to a gentleman named Todd Erickson, and he would have them at the Minnesota State Fair in a beautiful arcade. So, anyways,
actually,
are we running out of time?
Close on time. Do we have anything from the chat that we need to respond to? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So what we're gonna do? We're gonna transition real quick. Can you guys see that screen? What we're gonna do is we're gonna actually bring Amoto's phone onto a Zoom. And so that the stream and everyone here can actually see some of the features of your guys' games that you want to point out. So
cool.
You know, we've got Amoto. We've got a Moto Cam. Let's hear it for a Moto Cam. There we go. All right. So
okay, and now Amoto is going to. So
Amoto, why don't we start with Tanner's in Flesh and Blood? Correct? In Flesh and Blood, or with House of Flesh and Blood. So Tanner, I think the first thing that I would want to point out is the cool little trail out the side of the machine. And there's is that Dave Fix playing it?
Oh, it is Dave Fix playing it.
Oh, it totally is.
Hi, you're on the live stream.
I was gonna feel really, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Fix of American Pinball. So we got David playing House of Flesh and Blood right now. Tanner, what made you want to put something that comes out the side of the machine?
It's been one of those things that I've had the idea for, you know, kicking around. I have a billion stupid ideas that are going to make it into machines eventually, and that was one of them. It's the sort of thing that, like, normal size machines are difficult to move, and I would worry about a feature like that just being broken. Whereas this is such an easy game to move that, you know, even if it's a little less convenient, like, I can carry this game around by myself. So,
you just jinxed yourself. You better print another one of those tomorrow.
I don't have it with me, but I do have a spare.
I have to say, the first time I hit that shot, I sounded like a small child giggling. I was so happy to see the ball roll through that little trail. Why don't you tell me about the plumb bob in the top of the machine? Like, what's the current state of it, and you know, what's the goal there?
Yeah, so instead of a tilt bob in the kind of front of the cabinet, the tilt bob is actually visible and exists in the head. One thing about this game is due to the size and both the legs as well. It's easy to shake this game around, and I thought a normal tilt bob would be a little too punishing just because, you know, you'd be playing and I feel like you would tilt. So I thought both being able to look at it and gauge how much you're shaking the game around would make that a little more fair. And then with it being a horror game, that also kind of increases the tension a little bit, that you're able to see what this thing is doing. So I decided to put it in a visible spot, and then I'm a big Wedgehead fan. I love, you know, the games that have mechanical animations like Buckaroo or Little Clown or whatever. So eventually that's going to be a whole little scene that will go along with the rest of the game, while also fulfilling that tilt bob functionality. So right now it's just functions like a normal tilt bob. Eventually there's going to be a special mode in the game where when you tilt, it's not just going to be a ball end, but rather it's going to be something like the Oxygen Destroyer mode from Godzilla, or, you know, something where it'll start a time mode that if you fail, you lose your ball, but if you succeed, it continues.
Very cool, very cool.
Yeah. And
is there any other feature that you're like, that thing's got legs?
It does got legs.
So is there any other feature before we go over the next one that you're like, I need to talk about, I need to tell people about this, or try to, you know, is there any secret modes or switch hits that we need to try to aim for to trigger something cool this weekend at the Midwest Gaming Classic?
Not especially so yet. It does have a shaker motor, which is why it has the rubber feet, so it doesn't just walk away. So if you hit the outside the cabinet shot, it
Gives you a little
triggers
shake.
the shaker motor, so
Nice.
that's kind of fun.
Very cool. Emoto, why don't we go over to Kelly? Do you want to talk about Undertale, or do you want to talk about Volcano Blast?
Well,
Why don't we talk about your new one, Volcano
yeah, I
Blast?
figured
That sounds like
I've
fun.
been interviewed about Undertale a couple of times, so I figured let's give the new one a little bit of spotlight.
Absolutely. So in Volcano Blast, what was your marquee shot? Like the first thing you designed that you were like, I need to have this in a pinball machine, and then we could talk about that, or did you just design everything at once because you're a genius?
Well, I would say the volcano has been a recurring part of every version.
Does it blast?
It sure is.
Sorry, that was terrible.
Yeah. So the volcano, I always wanted it to be able to launch balls out of it,
Okay.
which I suppose is the answer to the ultimate question: does it eat the ball? Yes, it does.
Good call. Good call. Is there anything else that, like, in talking with Tanner, any sort of like modes or anything that we should be trying to aim for this weekend? Any new code that you want to show off?
Admittedly, right now there's not much game there.
Yeah, you're just happy you made it at this point,
Yeah,
right?
A lot of the work that I've done on it is on just getting it together, doing the internal design, the electronics, the audio system, all that stuff. Honestly, a lot of the features that are there, I implemented just within a week or two of the show. So as far as what there is, there's a random award feature that gives you either a ball save or good old-fashioned big points, which is 10,000.
Nice.
There's some drop targets. You can knock them down and then shoot the ball behind them to hit another target, which I don't remember if it awards points or not, but
Hey,
that's planned.
as long as the drop targets fall, if it doesn't score points back there, that's what code version are you at? You're like 0.84 or something. That's a 0.85 revision, so you're well on your way and all good. Emoto, why don't we go over to Ghost in the Shell here? Doug's artwork on Subhumans is gorgeous. It's sad that he decided not to join us because he's watching wrestling in the next room over. He couldn't miss it.
It's already started.
Yeah. So let's look at Ghost in the Shell. Ed, we've talked a lot about your game, and it's been out here. We've done a couple Marco in-depths and, under the glass. What's something that, we should be aiming for, code-wise, shot-wise, feature-wise? Like, give me the details.
If you do get a chance to go over and play it, there is my big feature is my left ramp, and I call it the two-way ramp. You can hit it forwards, or you actually hit it underneath. And if you get the scoop on the left, you start a mode where you have to hit it 9 times forward and 3 times reverse to complete all the members. It actually counts on the screen for you. That's one thing to try, and the other thing to try for is the hit all the cyborg letters out on there on the screen. That will give you into a switch hit mode that the first one's kind of normal. You hit the ramp and you're done. But the second or third one kind of has a few... Third one has a local celebrity voice in there.
Yeah.
Big shout out to a lot of the community that helped me out. Those 3D printing's been done by Joe Zenkis, a friend of mine. The Section 9 speaker grills. Powder coating's brand new purple. Joe also made the screen underneath the ramp. That was added about 2 years ago.
Your user interface is so sexy.
I know.
A beautiful man must have designed that.
There's this guy, I think he's working for Stern or a pinball company.
Yeah.
Jack Danger, thank you very much, has helped me.
I heard he worked on a movie that had a lot of bees in it.
Yeah, he did animations for a guy doing this.
Jack, I've got a photographic memory. I remember a lot of things.
Did Chris just Nardwar Jack there for a second? All right. Why don't we roll over to Dumpster Fire? And
Yeah, why don't we show Dumpster Fire?
we got
and
about
then we'll-
5 minutes.
Yeah, and then we'll go to the Parappa the Rapper game, because that one's actually really fun. So you can see there the blue cabinet is Killer Comet. It is currently in death. the middle's Parappa the Rapper, then Star Wars, Return from the Dumpster. But anyways, let's go back to Emoto, go back to the dumpster fire because it's not working. I broke a DVI or a DisplayPort to HDMI adapter, which I have a replacement for. But you can see here that television that's down there, that was found in an alley that I was just trying to avoid traffic. And I found it and then took it home and I repaired it.
Oh, hey, there's your
so
connector.
yeah, all it was the LEDs were broken.
Yep.
And so, which is a common thing on those. All of the metal that you see there was either found or, like, for example, the lockdown bar
That's just
was just a piece of
sheet
like,
form, right? Yeah.
well, it was a piece of like stainless steel that was from that Portello's again.
Yo.
And I just bent it down. The lollipop on the side is from American Pinball. Thank you very much.
Nice.
Thank you, David Fix. The coin door, I can't remember. But a lot of the other electronics that are inside of there, the computers mostly come from Free Geek Twin Cities, who is here today. And then a lot of the, yes, you can see inside, behind the doors.
Why are you trying to copy
The
Tanner
most.
like that?
Because, well, what I want is I would really like tall designers to stick their finger in there and get electrocuted. That's
not
my
a good
my
idea.
goal. No, not at
Emoto,
all.
why don't we go over to
so let's go
Cuphead?
over to Parappa the Rapper, which is my most recent dumpster games. So Parappa the Rapper is one of my favorite arcade-style games that has ever been made, and the saddest part about it is it never actually got a arcade release. Now, this one right here, you can see this gentleman is dancing along. I envisioned it as a conversion kit. So this game came out in 1996. So any arcade game that would have come out at that time would have been a conversion kit of some kind or another. So I had a spare pole position sitting around my house.
Nice.
And I was like, hey, why don't I do this? And you can see here, I had to design a control panel for it. It has the 4 buttons that PlayStation typically uses. And then it has a yellow and a blue button for left and right, so you can play along with the various characters. And Moto, if you could go up and show, there's Mr. Chop Chop Onion. He is Master Chop Chop Onion. It's just looking his sexy best.
Very cool.
But if you take a look at the marquee real quick here, and there's a story behind
He's
why.
having so much fun. I want to play this game.
Yeah,
Oh, it's super fun.
I don't
and
think she's
people
going
have
to
been
be
playing
able to
it.
get a close-up. That guy is proving way
People have been
too hard.
playing it all weekend. But the reason I'm calling it this game's official title is The Dumpster Parappa the Rapper Now. And the reason that I called it that was the sequel to Parappa the Rapper was Uma Jamma Lammy Now. And no, Uma Jamma Lammy. And there was an arcade release that was supposed to be released by Namco. And there was one discovered in a talk show host in the UK. Anyways, so I decided, and it was called Uma Jamma Lammy Now. So I decided to call this one The Dumpster Uma Jamma Lammy Now.
Nice.
And that's why it's that way. Anyways, Emoto, go over to Star Wars real quick. Because
Actually, I might need to hijack because I wanted to get a shot of Cuphead before we head out, because that is another really cool style of game of that. Like you've got designers
and Cuphead,
right now.
I know a little bit about the story of that. It was originally designed as a virtual pinball game. So you can go and get VPX, download Cuphead, and play it. And this particular game, what they decided to do was take it from virtual, which it plays beautifully, by the way, into reality.
Yeah, and that's actually a really cool point about, like, again, it's similar to Kelly's process. Cuphead being a VPX table that then got created and made into reality. Also, game like Sonic Spinball.
Oh, there we go.
Of course, Jody's back there.
Jody making a cameo.
But like Sonic Spinball, that Ryan McQuaid, who's now with American Pinball, was a virtual table, and he's done some interviews talking about that transition process of how to get it from
Matt,
that place.
Not just a virtual table, a great, very finished, very polished. Felt like a commercially released, like you would have expected it to be Zen, making this as a commercial product, and it Cuphead.
Yeah,
it plays beautifully and fits the theme perfectly because for those who don't know Cuphead's based on 1930s animation.
Yep.
And it is a throwback game, and that would have, of course, been an EM.
Yeah. And then once we get one last pan of that, if we could go back to Subhumans, that would be fantastic. So, like we talked about when I was talking to Ed originally, Ed's first attempt at homebrew or custom pinball was a retheme. From, I believe, if the story is correct, Subhumans is actually a Dolly Parton that was reimagined, redesigned, hand-drawn artwork done by a friend of ours, Doug, and it is... There are some people that go, there are many entry points into homebrew or custom pinball. There's basically there's no wrong way to do it.
So did you know that specific Dolly Parton actually has homebrew royalty? Because my mentor to build my own game was Scott Denisi, who built a little game you may have heard of called Total Nuclear Annihilation, which both of us own and will never sell. So when he built that in a Dolly Parton cabinet, the playfield that got pulled out is now Subhumans.
That's awesome.
I sold my Total Nuclear Annihilation and Scott, I sold it at a loss intentionally.
Ooh, that's not a good idea.
I never owned one. So.
But so we're basically at time at time now. Guys, I wanted to thank you for your time coming up here.
Wait. We gotta give a shout out to Daikaichu because this game is super awesome. When I first played it reminded me of my first time playing Total Annihilation when it was a white wood still. I unfortunately don't know a whole lot about you guys know the designer's name. Everything. We played it at Expo a few years ago. And
it's just appeared there.
It's such a fun game to play.
I'm going to be 100% honest, Emoto. I don't know who designed it. I've never seen it roll. I've never seen it enter the building. I don't see it exit. It's almost like Castlevania of like that machine shows up and disappears when it decides. I have no story on that. I'm a terrible moderator that I don't know.
I helped him install it. I helped him bring it in.
Nice. Well,
who is it?
You have an NDA, so you're not allowed to tell us.
I'm under NDA.
Yeah.
I've got to stay. I got to stay under NDA. Just like I'm going to tell you right now, at the very end of this, Stern's next 15 games.
Oh,
okay, are you ready?
That's
hold
a bad
it. We are
joke.
out of time.
So
Gosh,
if you get a chance to play that game, it's heart pounding, heavy, fast. It's really fun.
And if you see me at the show, you can ask me which those games are. They're going to be great.
So again, I just wanted to sign off. My name is Matt Menzik. Thank you guys for coming out. I know you guys don't get a lot of time at the show to enjoy the show because you're watching your games, and then guys like me and Emoto pull you up on stage to talk about your games.
Yeah, I still have to go get I still have to go get 2 games working and a television.
You'll get there.
Tracked mode.
But
so just want to say one quick thing. Big thanks to Matt for being our moderator today.
And thanks to Emoto.
His homebrew is
this was very lovely and fun, and a lot of us are the type of people that you can just pull our strings and we will talk. I could have probably done an hour by myself, but it is very fun, and we will end this all in a medley in honor of the new ABBA pinball game that was announced today, of us all singing Super Trooper.
Oh, okay.
Hold it. We're out of, we didn't get that cleared.
We are out of time.
What?
I mean,
oh my
let's.
Gosh, sorry the
all
lawyer
right, guys.
stepped in.
Like I said, thank you everyone on stream. Wonderful talking to you guys, and I'll be seeing you guys in like 5 minutes because I'm doing some software stuff with Skeleton Game, I think. So
and I'll be back here tomorrow to sell some like knives.
Nice.
Those like the little ones you can cut tomatoes with and then cut steak with. They're just really great knives. Be here tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you guys, and talk to you guys later, Internet.